Hi, I'm Emily.
And I'm Mary.
Welcome to Chatterbox Box, an F1 podcast.
Box.
Hi everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Chatterbox Box, where Emily and I speak about all things Formula One.
Yes, welcome back. We have a jam-packed episode this week. So it's actually really funny because on Tuesday, me and Mary were talking and we were like, I feel like we have nothing to talk about this week. And then, ha 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 ha. Yeah, okay. So stay tuned. We have a lot of news this week. We are going to obviously deep dive into the Andretti stuff. And then probably a big chunk of this is going to be talking about Lewis's massive news that he dropped this week. But I was thinking maybe let's kick it off with some of the smaller news stories this week. So take it away.
Okay, so I definitely have to talk about Charles. This guy is just living his best life unbothered. So, first off, we got a new single from the man himself. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like Coffee Shop Love or something like that. And he had fully admitted that his Spotify account got hacked, and that is definitely not him, although he did tease that he has some things underway, which is really exciting. I cannot wait. The other Charles related thing is that he went on live and he was karting one-handed, still overtaking people while casually multitasking. I wish I could be him, because if that was me behind the wheel, I would probably crash into someone many times.
Yeah, that's so real. He's spinning around, driving one-handed, probably going over 100 miles per hour. Okay, Charles. And of course, his Spotify was hacked. That would happen to him. He has the worst luck of anyone I've ever witnessed. I wasn't even surprised. I was like, it would get hacked, of course. I didn't listen to the song though. Did you listen to it?
I listened to maybe 30 seconds and I was like, there was a piano accompaniment, and I was like, could that be him? And I was like, no. This is totally wrong. The vibe just does not match.
Right. Yeah, I didn't listen to it at all because I already just created in my head what it was. And in my head, I decided it was one of his actual piano songs that he has already released with one of the TikTok AI Charles singing things over it. And I just decided that that's what's on his account, and I'm letting that memory live in my head.
Please continue that.
Is he going to take it down though? Why is it still up?
Don't know, because I was checking it, I think, this morning, and it was still up, and I'm like, come on. This person is getting free publicity.
I mean, I guess he's probably completely locked out of his account, but I would think he has a direct Spotify contact that he could call up and be like, that's not me. But maybe he's enjoying it. I don't know.
I think he's enjoying it. I mean, he could be getting a little bit of revenue from people listening to this.
Yeah, so. I think he's also busy right now. I saw him in Paris, sitting in some old cars and people taking videos of it. So he's a little occupied.
Too occupied for Spotify technical difficulties.
Exactly. So let's talk about some liveries. I feel like this is the beginning of the livery reveals. Next week is probably going to be much more intense with how many we're getting this week and the week after. But so far, we've gotten the Haas reveal. Do you have any thoughts on this car?
I think it looks cool. I'm looking at it right now on the left-hand side of my screen. I saw the reveal video, and the second I saw Chipotle, I was like, all right, sign me up.
Right.
I will eat Chipotle all day. It's nice. It's slick. It's just black and pops of red. So I think it very much speaks to the Haas name, and I'm hoping it gives them, I know liveries don't technically speak on the performance, but I'm hoping that it gives them just a little bit of an edge, because it looks kind of badass.
Yeah, I think it looks really nice. I really like the black, white, and red combo. I think Alfa Romeo, they were black, white, and red last year, so I wonder if they'll keep that vibe. I don't think the car looks drastically different from last year. Like when I saw it, I didn't see any noticeable differences. I'm also not really looking at the Haas car that often, so maybe that's why. I'm going to be so for real, I was a little just underwhelmed about the whole concept of like a livery reveal. I don't really think about the actual car that much. I feel like we don't see it enough to be able to examine the cars. They're going so fast around the track. I can't tell whose car is who most of the times, except when it's a obviously identifiable car like the orange with McLaren or like the red Ferrari. A lot of the times they blend together. I'm thinking as we move forward with these livery reveals, I'm going to continue to feel just underwhelmed and like, oh, okay, cool. Unless we get the Alpine pink camo, then I'll be losing my mind.
I 100% agree with you. I think the first livery reveal, like with Haas, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. I know that it depends on the team, but it can range from like, oh yeah, here you go, like look at how cool it is, to a little bit more intense, a little bit more in depth.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to like how McLaren is kind of like showing off like their livery, and then they also have that suit reveal that kind of looks more marching band-y. But yeah, I'm a little underwhelmed. I don't know what I was expecting. Like I thought that we would all see it like live and we would all be tuned
Mm-hmm.
in and be like, oh my god, that looks so good. But no, I woke up, logged into Instagram, and I was like, cool.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, cool. I think I thought maybe like the livery reveals were going to be a bigger deal because everybody's been saying that's such a big part of February leading up to the start of the races. And I was kind of just like, okay, cute. But we also got some livery reveals for the F1 Academy cars so far. McLaren showed Bianca's car. It is very, very orange. As we know, I am a certified orange hater, so I don't like it. But it looks like she is wearing the same race suit design as the F1 drivers. And I think that IndyCar wears this race suit as well for McLaren. So that's really cool. I think that they're unifying their race suit across all of the McLaren teams.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this orange looks so good on Bianca. Like it goes so well with her complexion.
Mm.
I don't know if I like would also be able to rock that super neon orange look, but I'm actually excited to see what their merch would look like for this year because I'm
Um,
pretty sure I'm going to add some to the cart.
Yeah, I actually really like the race suit. I think this is a very unpopular opinion, but I like the little diagonal. The only thing I don't like is how the one ankle is also orange. I think they should have just kept the black all the way down and it would have looked much better. But I kind of like the little like diagonal vibe. I haven't really seen anything like that before.
I do too. And if you're sitting in the car, it's going to be mostly orange anyways. I think the only like other times that you're going to see that diagonal cut is when they're walking around.
Hmm.
But I think it's going to look cute. I think we're going to get used to it. And honestly, if anyone could pull it off, it would be this entire group.
Yeah, the one orange ankle really reminds me of that one Lewis Hamilton outfit where he just like randomly has his one pant leg pulled up. We need to insert it in the YouTube version, but I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind. And I was like, I hate this. I hated when Lewis wore that outfit, and I hate the random orange ankle.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I know Dorian also shared her livery, and I'm curious what you think of it because it looks pretty sick in my book.
Yeah, to me, this is sick. It's almost like a matte black all the way through, and then hints of neon green and silver. Sick. I'm curious about why they chose neon green instead of the traditional Mercedes teal, but I think it looks really cool. I also think the two cars in general, they seem to look a little bit more F1 like compared to the F1 Academy cars we saw last year. So that's interesting to me. I am wondering what if this is like what all the cars are going to look like or if it's just the two cars we've seen so far, but I think they do look a little bit more like F1y than they did last year. It was a very noticeable difference last year. And I was like, what are these cars?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, it looks very similar to what I'm used to in terms of Formula One cars. So that kind of gives a little bit more of a, I don't know, like you can see like that one to one and like how it can transition
Mhm.
into the full Formula One experience. I really love the livery for Mercedes here. It is like matte black. It's very minimal. Like you have Dorian Pin's number and you have like just those like small accents of neon green. The only thing that this reminds me of rather than Mercedes is I think that like steak F1 team because they are like attributed to like that black and neon green. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
curious how those two would look like side by side and if it would be confusing. I know F1 Academy is different, but would be curious to see those side by side.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We did get a little bit of other F1 Academy news this week. So Red Bull finally announced their drivers. So all three of the Red Bull drivers will be going to MP Motorsport. So they'll all be on the same team. We have Hamda Alkabasi racing for Red Bull Racing. We have Amna Alkabasi racing for VCarb. And then I thought this was really interesting, but Emily DeHouse is, or DeHouse, I should have looked up how to pronounce that before we did this, but Emily will be driving for Red Bull, like Red Bull, the sports drink, not Red Bull Racing. It's very noticeable on their different race suits. One says Red Bull Racing, one says Visa Cash App RB, and one says just Red Bull. So she's racing for just Red Bull, the company overall, not Red Bull Racing. Interested in what the reason behind that was. I don't know if they'll really explain. So, yeah, the F1 Academy grid is now almost complete. All of the F1 associated teams have been, or F1 associated drivers have been announced. And then we still have 4 open spots, 2 on Rodin Motorsport, 1 on Campos Racing, and 1 on Art Grand Prix. Interested to see who those drivers will be, what they're going to be associated with, if it's going to feel weird that they're not F1 associated drivers. I'm also interested to see how they're going to maintain a team cohesiveness when every driver on the team has a different livery.
I agree. I think I'm super excited to see how F1 Academy plays out. I think this will be like the first official year for myself to get into Formula One in a full season, but also F1 Academy. So I'll be watching very closely and supporting all of our girls and also just having a better understanding of how it all fits into the F1 world and seeing like all of the other drivers who aren't affiliated with like F1, like how that dynamic kind of plays out as well.
Yeah, definitely going to be super cool. So I think that covered all of our like smaller news segments of the week. So one of the biggest stories this week, I think, was that Andretti has been denied for their attempts to get into F1. We did a lot of research for this episode, y'all. This is kind of giving the vibes of us presenting our research project, doing a little presentation. But we really wanted to give both of these stories the research and knowledge that they deserve because I think they're both very, very hot takes. So we're going to talk about Andretti and then obviously we'll talk about Lewis. Let's get started with Andretti.
Perfect. Yeah, so I thought it was super interesting as I was looking into the Andretti news story. At first impression, I thought it was just that Andretti was denied, period, point blank. And there was this announcement from Formula One that said essentially that Andretti Cadillac wasn't going to actually provide a competitive experience within Formula One. So I was very shocked and I was very like, very curious about where that all came from,
Mhm.
but kind of a little bit of a step back. Essentially, last year in the last quarter, Andretti Formula Racing LLC won the approval from Formula One to essentially continue with their bid to be the 11th team on the grid. And they are said to be the only entity which kind of fulfilled the whole selection criteria. I've heard that other kind of teams have tried, but it seems that Andretti Formula Racing hit all of the marks to continue on in like the bidding selection. The intention was for Andretti and General Motors to partner together to use the Cadillac branding that is owned by GM, and Alpine, which is a Renault owned brand, said that they would essentially supply Andretti Cadillac the engines if and only if their bid is approved until GM can build their own F1 power unit, which GM said that it would be finished by 2028.
Super, super interesting background story of all of this because this kind of broke the internet, I felt like on Wednesday, I think is when the news came out, and I didn't have a lot of context on it. So I was kind of confused.
Yeah, I was confused too because I thought it would be as simple as like application sent. Yeah, no, you're not good for us. And I was like,
Right.
like that would be shocking for me too. But there is a little bit more of a history there and a little bit more in depth in terms of why they weren't fully like approved at this round.
Yeah, having all that background in mind, what is the issue? Because it seems to me like they'd be a great fit for Formula One. So why did the FIA ultimately decide that they're not a good fit at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think this isn't specifically a problem with Andretti Cadillac, but there just hasn't been a lot of overwhelming support overall to expand the grid. And that's mostly because of the dilution of overall revenue, since the more money you have for your team, the more you can improve your car. But if you add that like 11th team, it gets divided into like 11 different groups, which is, it could be fine, but we're already seeing that like division of revenue not being as helpful for the other teams that aren't in like the top 5, for instance.
Mm,
The other thing is that when you are a new team, you have this entry fee, which is called the anti dilution fund, that all new entrants have to pay. And that's divided between all 10 of the existing teams, or how many existing teams there are. And the entry fee right now is $200 million.
wow.
And it in the long scheme of things, it doesn't seem like much because I think I'm not saying I have $200 million, but that seems like a fairly low entry fee to make sure that you are extremely serious about the sport and that you're going to fully commit.
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe the concern is more so not wanting to have an 11th team versus not wanting to have Andretti specifically, because it sounds like bringing in an 11th team, then you're splitting up the prize money and it's just a lot. So maybe the other teams are really against having an 11th team because it seems like there's overwhelming fan support for Andretti joining the grid.
Absolutely. And I think after passing that initial stage, Formula One rejected the bid in its existing form, although they did mention that there is a good chance of Andretti Cadillac joining in 2028 if
Mm.
General Motors follows through and can build their own F1 power unit. So I'm curious if using an existing power unit from Alpine, they just thought, oh, well, we already have Formula One cars that use very similar engines. So maybe we just wait until 2028 when there is a brand new engine and that could make a difference in like the
Mm.
competitive sector of Formula One.
Yeah, that does make sense, but I think there was a lot of drama around this. Obviously, I love the drama. I don't love being in the drama, but I love witnessing the drama. And I like my jaw dropped when I read the statement and basically the FIA had said Andretti is not going to bring any value to Formula One, and Formula One it will instead be bringing value to Andretti, so it doesn't make any sense. And I thought that was such a cold statement.
I agree. My jaw dropped when I read that because it seemed like such a scorned, like lovers to enemies type of situation. It's not me, it's you. Like you're the problem here. And that's why I was so curious about like the history of it all. Obviously, Andretti refuted this belief, saying that both Andretti and Cadillac are two successful organizations in global motorsports, and they are already in the progress of making a competitive car. But backing it up just a little bit more, because obviously, this is my first full year interested in motorsports. I have never really heard of the Andretti name, and I've also only affiliated Cadillac with SUV, like grandma, grandpa type of cars. So I was like, like Cadillac joining motorsports like that, and F1 specifically. I'm like, that doesn't seem to line up with their branding. But as I looked into it a little bit more, I've learned that Andretti is extremely popular in US motorsports due to their prominence in IndyCar. And Andretti is also referred to as a household name in America. I think when Emily and I heard that, we were like, but which house? Because it wasn't in any of ours. If you take a step back and think about those that have been interested in motorsports, specifically American motorsports, for quite some time, Andretti is kind of like the equivalent of Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull. So I can definitely see the impact there from Andretti joining Formula One.
Yeah, I think it's a big part. A lot of the discourse that I heard about why people were so upset about this decision is because we see Formula One trying to make such a big effort to break into the American market with this increased US Grand Prix. We had 3 in 2023. They're talking about maybe Chicago, maybe New York City, maybe New Jersey, but these races aren't selling out. There's empty seats in the grandstand. People are thinking that having Andretti specifically come into the grid would really help with the US fan base, especially the US motorsports fan base, because they're so big in IndyCar. They think it would bring a lot of people over and really help to get things going a little bit more in the US. So I definitely see where that's coming from. It does feel a little cold and a little almost like dismissive and trying to maintain this like sense of exclusivity, because why do you want to be so big in North America but you're not wanting to bring in this North American team? I know obviously Haas is a US based team, but I would say I do think Andretti would bring more value than Haas. So maybe the thing isn't let's add Andretti as an 11th team. Maybe it's how can Andretti fit in to the 10 team thing. Maybe we need to replace Haas with Andretti. Maybe one of the other smaller teams could be replaced with Andretti. I don't know. I do think that it sounds like they'll come to F1 at some point because a lot of people are in support and I think it would make sense. But yeah, we also looked into Andretti's history with F1. So tell us a little bit about that.
So the Andretti name runs a little bit deeper past the US motorsports. Mario Andretti has held so many championship titles across different motorsports, particularly in Formula One. I don't remember the year, I think it was 1978 or something like that. So Andretti has history with Formula One. I think they understand what it takes to join the rank of Formula One and to race with the very best. He's also won championship titles in IndyCar, as you mentioned, NASCAR, and also the World Sports Car Championship. Similarly, his son, Michael Andretti, is a racing driver and current team owner who's also won a handful of championships, although not with Formula One. But since he's retired, his ownership specifically of Andretti Motorsport has won some IndyCar Series championships and Indy 500 races. I think maybe 3 to 5 each, which is really awesome. So I think the history is there. I think it makes sense. This is a very prominent racing family that I think would provide so much kind of impact with Formula One and the American fans. I'm a little bit more hesitant of them partnering with Cadillac. When I did the history, it looks like Cadillac does have a little bit of a racing history and background, particularly with Le Mans and other American motorsports, but quite recently it's only been in American motorsports. It may have made a little bit more sense if, rather than the Cadillac name, they used the Chevrolet brand, since Chevrolet has like sports cars like Camaros and Corvettes. And I think at this moment in time, Cadillac only is selling like SUVs. I think they've totally moved away from their sedans and their cars because that's what's currently selling is like the
Mm.
SUVs. So for them to jump into Formula One and to build like an engine under like the General Motor name, I think it would have made a lot more sense if they attached like Camaro or Corvette because you can like actually understand that lineage and
Mhm.
equate it with racing rather than Cadillac, which I'm not sure makes sense with the racing brand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like there is a place in F1 for Andretti, but maybe they need to revisit their pitch a little bit, maybe partner with someone other than Cadillac, maybe get their own F1 engine, and maybe that will help this bid to go a little bit more. But I do think that the support is there, and I think there's a positive future ahead for them in F1.
Absolutely. Maybe not 2025, but hopefully they'll be able to work out all of the kinks and revisit this in 2028, which is just a few more years away.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna have enough change going on in 2025, it sounds, because this is a perfect segue into the Lewis Hamilton news of the week. So if you are an F1 fan and you've been living under a rock, Lewis Hamilton made a shock announcement that he will be leaving Mercedes at the end of the 2024 season and transferring to Ferrari. Interestingly enough, I've heard a lot of people theorizing that this news got leaked to distract from the Andretti drama because F1 and FIA have gotten a lot of backlash about the Andretti decision. And then conveniently, the very next day, we find out about Lewis transferring to Ferrari. So I don't know. I don't know, but I was absolutely shocked. I feel like we should just talk a little bit about our reaction to this news because we were both like losing our minds.
Yes. So last episode, we had randomized the grid. We had maybe potentially, seen and predicted the future, where when we were pulling for the Ferrari team, it was Lewis Hamilton and Lance Stroll. And I remember specifically saying, Lewis is so loyal to Mercedes. He like the relationship with him and Toto Wolff is so strong. I really just imagine him kind of continuing on with Mercedes and potentially even retiring with Mercedes. So like imagine my surprise not even a week later hearing this news of yeah, like Ferrari has officially signed Lewis Hamilton in 2025. I was like, no, because in the back of my mind, I'm asking what went wrong because I thought
Hmm.
that relationship was so strong.
Yeah, it was a shocker. It was definitely a shocker. So many things it seems like went wrong. I think Lewis was quoted like sometime during the season just a few months ago about planning to stay at Mercedes and feeling really like dedicated and committed to staying at Mercedes. I did a little bit of digging at like were there any hints like should we have seen this coming? So upon signing the original contract I'm saying meaning to stay on for 2024 and 2025, Toto had said it was always a formality that we would continue together, and it's energizing for us all to be confirming that publicly. So, really putting out this narrative of like, there was no question that Lewis was staying at Mercedes. It was just a matter of when and like ironing out the contract details and then announcing the contract publicly. Turns out that Lewis had actually signed that contract to say that he was coming to Mercedes for 2024 and 2025 in May. I don't think we got the announcement until October. But some context of things that I think went a little bit wrong throughout the 2023 season. Lewis was on the podium twice. The first was in Australia. That was pre you watching. So I don't think you have seen this, but you've probably seen the interviews about it. Lewis showed up on the podium and people were asking him, how does it feel? It's been a tough start to the season so far. Australia was the third race. So they're like, how does it feel to be on the podium? And he was like, yeah, it's amazing. They're like, what's it like for you and the team? And he outright says, like, I don't know what it's like for the team because they didn't show up. They're not here. And it was really sad, actually. And that was in Australia. And then I don't even think I realized that this happened again in Singapore because I was so focused on the shock of Carlos Sainz winning and it not being Red Bull for once. And the grid was Sainz, Lando Norris, and Lewis Hamilton. And Mercedes didn't show up again. They didn't really apologize. At first, they put out a statement trying to say, no, we were there. But there were fans at the podium. There were news people at the podium all saying, like, Mercedes was not there. And so then the next day, they came out with a different story saying it was because George had DNF'd in that race. So they were focused on like dealing with the car and stuff like that. But I think that's pretty bad because, as we know, with this 2023 season, it was mostly Checo and Max dominating the podium like week after week after week. So anytime anybody other than them showed up on the podium, it was a big deal. And especially Hamilton showing up on the podium and his own team not showing up, I can't help but wonder if that kind of started planting the seeds in his mind of like, maybe I don't want to stay at Mercedes. Maybe I'm not valued here, especially when you think about who was congratulating him and celebrating him with him. It was Ferrari and it was McLaren who were showing up and congratulating him and being there with him. I wouldn't be surprised if that played a part in, his decision. And then, yeah, a lot of this was, I think, contract related. So there were rumors going around that Hamilton was wanting a 5-year deal from Mercedes, and he wanted an additional $250 million commitment that would be broken down into $25 million a year for 10 years so that he could stay as a brand ambassador for Mercedes even once he retired from racing. And it seems that Mercedes turned that down. That's wild to me that Mercedes would turn that down. He won them 6 championships. I don't know. Wouldn't you want Hamilton to be the face of your brand until 2035? Mind blowing. So I'm wondering if that also played into his decision. He definitely wanted more of a say in car development. So he had said that often, like they made decisions about the car that I didn't agree with. He was pretty vocal about that. There was that whole radio where Toto comes on and he's like, Lewis, we know the car sucks. Like, please just drive it. And it was like, whoa. Okay, Toto. And then it was pretty much implied that Mercedes was planning to let Lewis go for 2025 anyway. When Toto came out and talked about all this shocker news this week, he was like, we knew we were going to have Lewis until at the latest 2025. So it didn't seem like they were planning on having him for longer than that, which just feels like wow to me. Like this is one of the greatest of all time racing drivers. And it does feel like Mercedes was losing hope in him towards the end.
Yeah, and that's so sad, just considering that this is it 10, 11 years with Mercedes and Lewis together. They obviously know a lot about how one another like works, and it's kind of defeating to hear and also see like in 2023 that support shifting away and maybe having that focus be a little bit more closely aligned to George, which I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I would love to see him in that first driver's position because he's a great driver. I believe he deserves it. But I mean, he has, I think, a long kind of career ahead of him within Formula One. And right now, Lewis is, I think, 39, 38, 39. So his time is going to end a little bit sooner. And I know, like Lewis has always said, yeah, if I still have it in me, I'm going to race for a very, very long time. So seeing that, like the lack of support for Mercedes, his like own team when he's not like when he is winning and needing that additional push and hearing about these car development strategy ideas as well is a little bit disheartening. But I'm also happy to hear that like Ferrari and McLaren were had such a good camaraderie. They really were supportive of Lewis and his wins. So that is a very interesting detail, considering that like he is signing with Ferrari, and that is kind of the end all be all of your like Formula One career.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were thinking, why Ferrari? I know we were thinking, why Ferrari? We were texting each other all day Thursday, like waiting for Lewis to confirm the news, for Ferrari to confirm the news, for Mercedes to confirm the news. Like, is this a rumor? Is this really happening? It's not like Ferrari is doing significantly better than Mercedes. Like, they're probably relatively equal, with Mercedes having a leg up in strategy. I think it's like a known thing that Ferrari's strategy is not that great. It's kind of a meme now. So why Ferrari? I think a lot of this really comes down to the contract. So Ferrari, it is rumored, is giving him a annual salary of $80 million a year, making him the highest paid F1 driver. I think Max Verstappen's salary is around $75 million a year. He also will be getting an additional $20 million a year in bonuses, which is meant to be geared for his philanthropy projects. So that's
Yay.
really, really awesome. Meanwhile, his salary at Mercedes in 2023 was $55 million a year. So, like, we're looking at a $45 million a year raise. That's crazy. Like, obviously, this man is probably rich beyond belief, but like, how can you turn down a $45 million bonus?
You can't. You absolutely can't. Imagine all of the things he can do on top of that $20 million like bonus specifically for his philanthropic foundation. He can do so much more with like that raise as well, and that's at his discretion. I'm sure like he has big plans for it as well.
Another big part of the Ferrari contract that I think was appealing to him was that he is being told he's able to work on the development of the car, which is clearly something he was not happy with at Mercedes. So it sounds like he's getting more of a say in building the car and getting it well suited to himself. And then this also just seems to be a strategic move considering the upcoming 2026 technical regulations. That tends to be when dominating cars maybe like fall out of their domination because all of these technical changes. So really getting ahead of the curve there and being able to have more of a say in the car design, the car development, especially considering the upcoming 2026 regulations, I think is really huge.
Yeah, that is awesome. I think like as we look into the story and like the background of why Lewis would start shifting over to Ferrari and feeling like this is the right time to make that move, it is starting to kind of become a clearer picture in that sense. But that's not to say that this was a very easy decision.
Mhm.
Could you talk about what else could have led him to making this decision and signing a contract with Ferrari?
Yeah, I think that this was clearly a very calculated, logical decision, but there are a lot of really emotional aspects to this when you sit and think about it. I think one of the biggest is Fred Vasseur, who is actually like a badass. Like, I feel like we should do a Fred segment one day about how badass this was that he took over Ferrari. He like scooped up Lewis Hamilton. Like, Fred, okay, okay. Fred is not coming to play. But Fred and
Serious.
yeah, Fred is so serious. Fred and Lewis worked together really early on in Lewis's career, so kind of coming full circle with okay, he's back with Fred. I have a quote from Will Buxton that I thought was really lovely. He said, "There would be something pretty lovely about Lewis linking back up with Fred at Ferrari. He was responsible for creating the potency of the young sensation who shocked the establishment 20 years ago. One last dance to make history together would be poetic and really very special." And honestly, like movie worthy. Like, you're coming back with someone you started your career off with to try to bring back a struggling team and win another championship. Ugh, love it. Love the
Ugh,
drama.
I just got chills.
Right? Like, oh, okay. I think another big thing is Nikki Lauda. Like, we know that Lewis and Nikki were really very close. And earlier in his career, Niki Lauda was able to join Ferrari when they were struggling and actively work the team around. Actually, Michael Schumacher had a similar journey in 1996. And I think both Niki and Michael are really big inspirations for Lewis. I can see him, wanting to have a similar trajectory, a similar path, which would be beautiful. Also, some records to be considered. Like, if Lewis was to succeed in Ferrari, if he goes to Ferrari, he turns them around, he wins his World Drivers' Championship, he would not only become the first 8-time championship in the sports history, but he would also be the only driver other than Juan Miguel Fangio to win titles with 3 different teams. So that would be huge. And then, yeah, another record, he'll be 40 when he starts racing for Ferrari. So that is wow. I think that in itself is an inspiration because I think there's just a societal notion that your life kind of ends at 30. Okay, you're 30, but we have Hamilton here at 40 making this huge change in his career, and if he was able to win a championship at that age, that would be wow. The oldest person who ever won an F1 title was, again, Juan Manuel Fangio at the age of 46. And no one has won a championship in their 40s since 1966. That would be really awesome. And then I think, just the final emotional aspect of this decision is that it's been a childhood dream for Lewis to drive for Ferrari. I think that's a dream for many F1 drivers just because of the notoriety of Ferrari. So yeah, lots of really cool, meaningful elements to this decision as well.
Oh, I still have chills kind of running up and down my arms, my spine. That feels like a dream come true for Lewis, especially with kind of those calculated risks, understanding, is it time? Is it not time? Like, when does it make sense to kind of move on from a team that has provided him with so much in order to pursue, that one last leap of faith, and seeing that
Mhm.
full circle with Fred Vasseur again. Oh my gosh, I would be sobbing if he
Mhm.
won his 8th world championship title, and just having all of the successes and just having that validation that his hard work, everything that he has built up to at this point, is so worth it.
Yeah, just imagine the movie. We're gonna get a movie, a biopic about Lewis Hamilton at some point, and it would be so beautiful if this ends with him at Ferrari with Fred from the beginning of his career. It's the same actors all the way throughout the movie. They're back together and they bring home that 8th win. I'm already tearing up thinking about it. That would be phenomenal. Yeah, just wow, so much to think about.
Absolutely. And the other thing to think about is how is everyone else reacting to this news with Lewis moving over to Ferrari in 2025?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's been a lot of conversation around oh my God, what does Toto think? What does Charles think? What does George think? So many funny memes of oh my gosh, George, now that he's the first driver, all that kind of stuff. I think that Toto seemed supportive. He seemed a little sad when he did the video about it. It did kind of almost feel like he was holding back tears. But the statements he was making seemed very supportive towards Lewis, very much understanding of the decision, and adamantly saying that they will continue their friendship and there's no hard feelings. So I think that's great. What about Charles? What do you think Charles thinks about this?
Oh my gosh, I so all of Friday or whatever day it was, I just could not focus on work. I think it was Wednesday, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I just could
Mhm.
not focus on work because I was trying to figure out all of these. I was trolling on TikTok, trolling on Instagram, and the one interview that Charles did
Mhm.
where I think it was with Sky Sports, and essentially they were like, who would you imagine to be your all-time ideal teammate? And Charles comes in, he's like, oh, and then he laughs and he's like, hello, Lewis.
Yeah. Oh my
I
gosh.
giggled. I was like, "Oh, so maybe this has been kind of a long time in the making and
Mhm.
just waiting for all of the puzzle pieces to line up."
Yeah, that is such a good point. I think we have to talk about, like, the 1644 lore. This is such a big deal for us, you guys, because Lewis is my favorite driver, Charles is Mary's favorite driver. Having them both on a team together, like, I don't think we can accurately describe how much we were losing our freaking minds over this. Like, unreal. I love Ferrari. I have been, just supporting Mercedes more because I love Lewis so much. But the second I found out that Lewis is going to be on Ferrari, like my actual favorite team and my favorite driver together, I went and bought this Ferrari hat like immediately. I had to. It was
Amazing.
absolutely necessary. I am so happy about this. It's just like it's great. But I really think there's like some 1644 lore. I think that this has been in the works for a long time. It sounds like John Elkin at Ferrari called Lewis in May to start informally discussing the potential of moving to Ferrari. Like nothing was official. May was when he signed with Mercedes, apparently, for 2024, 2025. But, he had this exit clause that he could leave Mercedes after 2024. So it was kind of like in the works and they were talking about it. And then in May at Monaco, that's when we got the interview that Mary's talking about, where Charles had said, "Hello, Lewis," when he was asked about who his dream driver would be. So I cannot help but think that like this has been in the works with Charles and Lewis for a really long time. Then we got in October in Austin when they both got disqualified, they did the little joint post. And we were like, okay, this is amazing. 1644 girlies like rise up, like, yes. But also, like, if you really think about it, that's actually wow. Like I've never really seen two drivers from a different team come together to like post something like that. Like we should have been like, something is up. Like we were just busy, like, oh my gosh, our favorite driver is posting together. Like, wow, wow, wow. Something was
I was
up.
like, mood." Like, it was just
Yeah.
so comical because Lewis just, like, reposted and, like, shared the same thing, and all he said was, "Mood."
Like we were
So
just
I was like, millennial king for the millennial girlies. I'm like, "Yes, Lewis, yes."
like
Didn't think to connect the dots.
literally the proof was in the pudding. The signs were there. We were not seeing the signs because the very next week after Austin, we have that whole thing in Mexico where Lewis is like taking Charles' picture, like posing him in the picture, like taking it. And then he posted it. He posted it to his Instagram account. Like, were we blind? Like where were we? What were we thinking?
We were there. I think we were just so excited about the moment. We were like, "Oh, Lewis is doing like great PR for Charles." Like that's the mothering and like having Charles pose in like good light, like Lewis, the fashionista, like
Mhm.
showing Charles like all of the moves. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, yes, exciting." We completely like just didn't think to dig deeper about what that meant. And even if we did, we were like, it can't mean anything. Like they're all friends, right? Like they all work together, like somehow, like on the grid, like they see each other all the time.
Mhm.
So they must have some camaraderie and some friendships. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I kind of just assigned it to.
Right, I literally was just like, "Oh, of course Lewis loves Charles. Everybody loves Charles." Like,
Everybody
he's
loves Charles.
okay, like,
Everybody loves Ferrari.
maybe they're having a little, like, mentor vibe, like, maybe Lewis is stepping in for Sebastian Vettel as, like, the champion of Charles Leclerc. I don't know, I really didn't think much of it other than that it was, like, cute, but then we did get another sign because that holiday dinner that they always do. Who was sitting next to each other? Lewis and Charles. Like this has been in the works and we were blind. And as certified 1644 girlies, I want to apologize to all the other certified 1644 girlies that we didn't pick up on this, but This would have been ultimate level DeLewLew, like us just deciding that Lewis and Charles were going to race together for our own entertainment. So it didn't even cross my mind. But I just want to say that this whole situation is proof that DeLewLew is the Solulu. Manifestation works, and this is going to be the hottest team on the grid. Period.
That's it. That's it. You can't make this up.
Yeah. I also think that there's a lot of worry going around for the pure 16 girlies who aren't 1644 girlies. So there's a lot of worry because, like, how is Charles still going to be the first driver when Lewis is coming along? But I want to talk about how Charles did know about Lewis before signing his own contract. So he was clearly like on board. This must be benefiting him in some sort of way. I mean, he's going to be teammates with one of the greats. And I would like to believe that Lewis is also setting the team up for Charles' long-term success once he retires. I don't think Lewis will want to stay on for much, much longer. I kind of get the sense he wants to get his eighth and just kind of like fade out. And he seems to really love Charles. So I could see him setting this team up for, his short-term success, but Charles' long-term success, which would be great. I love that.
Yeah, and I think Lewis is kind of at that point, just like getting his 8th championship. He absolutely adores Charles. And I think at this point, it's more about like the additional mentorship that Charles is going to get. Like he said that himself, that if they were going to be on the same team together, the amount of things that he would learn from Lewis, kind of just understanding like that thought process, the strategies. And I mean, can you imagine like within like your like professional career having one of the greatest people potentially nearing retirement working with you to build something that you are so proud of, essentially from the ground up, and making you feel confident, making you understand and helping you understand kind of the whole vision. Like you cannot top that. And I think Charles also has that understanding that like, yes, we're going to win it together. There's going to be some teamwork. And like, honestly, if we're going to continue being DeLewLew, I'm seeing a 1-2 from like Charles and Lewis. They're going to help each other out.
Yes.
They're going to be on the podiums together.
Bahrain 2025.
It's going to be Ferrari merch after Ferrari merch for me.
Yeah, hot out the gate, Bahrain 2025, Lewis 1, Charles 2, and then, I don't know, we'll throw like Carlos 3, Red Bull is coming in last. Manifest it, period.
Manifesting.
Speaking of Carlos, I think we probably won't go very in-depth into this because a lot of this we're going to talk about in our predictions episode, but I think this is likely going to cause a major grid shakeup. People weren't really talking about this possibility when considering silly season and what's next for everybody. We are already hearing rumors of maybe Alex Albon to Red Bull, maybe Valtteri Bottas coming back to Mercedes, or maybe Fernando Alonso coming back to Mercedes, maybe Mick Schumacher coming to Mercedes. It's really like nobody knows what's going to happen next. And I think there's a lot of concern for Carlos Sainz. What do we think is next for Carlos Sainz?
Yeah, that is so hard for me because I know that Carlos has been prepared for this, and I'm sure like he's also ready to kind of move on to new and better opportunities. I think in the back of his mind, while Charles and Carlos work together very well as a team, he has that understanding that Ferrari is going to prioritize Charles over Carlos. Like that is their main guy. So I think Carlos has had to think about other opportunities, whether that's Audi, whether like he's going to try to get back to Red Bull or, potentially even Mercedes. There's a lot up in the air, and I think we're going to see a little bit of that play out within this season, a little bit of 2025 until like Audi officially is like ready and ready to kind of tackle on the new season in 2026. But I don't think this is going to be the last of Carlos, but it is kind of it for me. It's sad because I love
Mhm.
Carlos very much, and he's been taking this in like good stride, very like amicable and very cordial. And I was a little disappointed in Ferrari just making that like breaking news announcement, focusing on Lewis, which as they should, but Carlos won Ferrari like pole position in Singapore. At that, like he is the only driver in
Mhm.
2023 that was not a part of Red Bull to have won a race. So I feel like they should have done a little bit more just to show his appreciation. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
yeah, I think that this is very much not the end for Carlos. Like you said, I'm just kind of surprised by the timing of the Ferrari announcement. It
Mhm.
feels like telling someone you're firing them in 10 months, telling someone that you're quitting your job in 10 months on Lewis's behalf just feels like a little weird to me. But like we said earlier, I do think it was leaked. So I think they were maybe pushed into announcing it a little sooner than expected. And also, it is kind of nice to give Carlos this heads up almost a year in advance so he knows that he needs to be looking for another seat or needs to be looking for something else to do in 2025 because I think it's almost certain that Carlos is going to go to Audi due to his family ties with Audi. But as for what he does in 2025, it's kind of nice that he has almost a whole year to decide that now. So maybe it is nice that he got this heads up instead of thinking he's staying with Ferrari and finding out in like August that that's not the truth. So I don't know. I think we'll have maybe more of a clear prediction of what we think is next for Carlos in our predictions episode. So stay tuned.
Yeah. I'm just in shock at all of
Yeah.
the news that we were able to cover in today's episode. I'm pretty sure that is at least all of the high level news articles that we've looked at. And I'm really happy that we were able to kind of dig a little bit deeper in the Lewis to Ferrari in 2025, as well as the Andretti bidding news as well. But stay
Mhm.
tuned. I think we have so much more coming up in our other episodes in the future, especially as we are ramping up for this new 2024 season.
So, with that being said, thank you all for listening. I think that's the end of our episode for today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Over now.
Bye.
Bye, F1 World.
No, not yet, not yet.
Oh no, I'm saying like bye for today.